Hello, I'm Marcia Cavanaugh. Thanks so much for joining us. Qualifying for the city's October election will be next week, so the politics is starting to take shape. We'll look at the early polls and a quick start from the mayor. Meanwhile, not all politics is glamorous, as the city council examines trash collections, and new zoning rules will impact certain neighborhoods. At the state level, vetoes from the recent legislative session are still an issue. All of this, plus a new program to help Black-owned restaurants, the latest on COVID, and in this, a week of political upheaval in Haiti, we are reminded about the historic link between the island and Louisiana. Joining us are tonight's Informed Sources, Errol Laborde, producer of Informed Sources, Jeff Adelston, reporter, the Times-Picayune, the New Orleans Advocate, Kevin McGill, reporter, The Associated Press, and Rich Collins, reporter, Biz New Orleans Magazine. We're going to go over to Jeff first. And there was a poll taken. It was with the Crime Commission. New Orleans Crime Commission has released a poll on just how people are feeling about Mayor Cantrell and some other issues in the city.
Yeah, so the poll was mainly focusing on crime, as you might expect from the New Orleans Crime Commission.
Right.
But also did some favorability polling on the mayor and some other officials. And heading into qualifying, which, as you said, begins next week, the mayor's actually in pretty good shape. The poll found 62% favorability rating, which is actually a little low for where she's been in recent months. There were polls over last fall and when we were more heavily into the pandemic that had her in the 70s. But 62% is pretty good. The obviously anything above 50% is all you need. And as of yet, there's no real strong candidate with any kind of political experience or really strong base of support that's announced that's going to challenge her.
And so what other issues came up in this poll?
Well, the poll found, possibly unsurprisingly, again, both given who was doing the poll and the surge in crime we've seen recently, crime is a top issue for, across the board, across neighborhoods, across races in New Orleans. That's really the big focus right now. One other thing that's interesting about the poll is a lot of times I think people think about criminal justice issues as kind of an either-or situation. Either you're for more police and or you're for criminal justice reform kind of things that improve reforms that would increase social services, try and sort of prevent crime before it happens. And what this poll found was basically people taking an all-of-the-above approach. They wanted more police, they wanted more technology for police, more funding for those kinds of measures, but also wanted an improved social safety net, counseling, efforts to sort of keep people from becoming criminals in the first place.
But Jeff, I noticed in the poll that while the ratings for the mayors were favorable, council got sort of mixed reviews. The judiciary got bad ratings in this.
That's right. The judiciary got, I believe it was around 30% approval, and that was among the lowest, I believe that was the lowest approval rating in the poll. So that's definitely interesting. It's not really clear what's causing that. You know, one theory I've heard thrown out there is judges kind of get it from both sides, right? They get the criminal justice reform people think they're being too harsh. The tough on crime people think they're being too lenient. So there might be some of that happening there. They're not really known as much. They're not individually known as much as some of the other people surveyed, like the mayor or the city council or the DA. So there may just be a question of people not really having a solid opinion on their performance just because they're less familiar with them.
So elections are in October. When does qualifying start?
Qualifying starts on Wednesday, July 14th, and runs through the end of the week. So we're going to see who's going to sign up for a whole range of elections, mayor, city council, sheriff, assessor. Basically every municipal office is up this October.
And so there's just no word out there of any candidate who's going to be running up against the mayor.
She's certainly going to draw some sort of opposition. What I think we haven't seen yet is someone that really has shown that they've got the resources, the profile, the name recognition to really create a serious threat. But of course, anything can happen in an election.
But anybody with a serious campaign would have had to have started seriously campaigning by now, getting people and getting money together.
That's right. You usually need quite a while. The mayor herself started months and months before qualifying started. You need to be getting your name out there. You need to be getting your donors. We've even seen most of the high-profile candidates for the at-large race, which is probably going to be the most interesting race this year if the mayor doesn't get significant opposition. The at-large race candidates have all announced already, so you would have expected if there were other major candidates out there hoping to challenge Cantrell, they would have announced already.
Have you heard this Save New Orleans spot?
I have not yet. You mentioned it right before we came on, and I haven't seen it. I did just look them up, and it's not entirely clear to me who's behind that. It's interesting. They're set up as a 501c4, which is a group that you can restrict information about who gets information about your donors. So, and it seems like they're an organization that's being set up to oppose the mayor, but it doesn't seem like they have a candidate that they're backing.
Well, we'll see what qualifying brings next week, right? Okay, Jeff, let's stick with you right now.
Sure.
Because a real big issue that's concerning everybody, certainly way beyond New Orleans, is COVID. And we're hearing about the variant now being prominent here and some disturbing stats.
Yeah, so the number of new cases reported over the past week is now more than double the number of cases we saw just 2 weeks ago. Hospitalizations are up 50% over last week, and what the experts are saying is that this is the Delta variant making its way through the population of Louisiana, which is particularly concerning because experts also say that the main defense we have against the Delta variant, which is much more infectious than previous variants we've dealt with, is vaccinations. And the vaccination rate in Louisiana is very, very low. We're only at about 39% of the population with at least one of their shots. So we're potentially in a very vulnerable position as we're heading into the summer.
What are local health officials saying about this?
Well, local health officials are largely saying that this are largely blaming the Delta variant. They're saying, we're potentially looking at we're not in a crisis mode yet, but we're potentially looking at some very concerning rises in the number of cases that we're seeing.
We're starting to see businesses open up, tourism starting up again. Are we in danger of having that kind of locked down again, or at least brought back a bit?
I think that remains to be seen. It is worth noting that historically, over the course of the last, the numbers we're seeing right now are historically low compared to what we've seen in some of the highest parts of the pandemic. What's worrying is we don't really know where this is going to go. We've seen how what appears to be small rises at first can pretty dramatically increase, and how difficult it can be to stop an outbreak when it starts. So it's really going to be a question of how quickly this spreads and whether it's able to be contained on its own or whether it's going to need additional measures. Although, again, at this point, no one is talking about putting additional restrictions back that I've heard, either on the state or the local level.
And we still hear that vaccines are effective, even if you've had your vaccine several months ago, that you are protected against serious illness and death.
That's correct, even against the Delta variant. There is concern, however, that previous infections don't provide as much protection protection against the Delta variant, which is why a lot of the experts say vaccinations are important.
Isn't it true that the new cases are people who did not get their vaccine?
That's what the experts are saying. They're seeing primarily among people that did not get their vaccine. There have been breakthrough cases, which is what it's called when you have been vaccinated and you still get sick. Those tend to be milder. There's a lot less risk of hospitalization and of death if you've been vaccinated and you still get sick. And then that's on top of an overall lower chance of getting sick in the first place.
All righty, Jeff, thanks a lot. Kevin, let's go over to you right now. Governor vetoed a couple of controversial bills. People definitely have definite opinions about it one way or the other. Is there going to be an override session?
Well, it looks like a safe bet that there will be an override session on July 20th. We won't know for sure until next week. The Constitution requires an override session 40 days after every regular session, but there's never been one held because the Constitution also provides that a majority of the House or the Senate can decide that's not a good idea, and they've never wanted to return for one before. I guess it's a sign of bigger partisan politics and also the emotional and political drives behind these two particular bills. The governor vetoed 28 bills during or after the last session, but there are two that are driving the override movement. One is Senator Beth Meisel's bill affecting transgender athletes, although the word transgender doesn't appear in the bill anywhere. Boiled down to its essentials, it says basically that for high school and college athletics, boys and men's teams will be open only to people identified as biologically male. Women's and girls' teams biologically born females. The governor vetoed that one, essentially saying it's a solution in search of a problem at this point in Louisiana. There's also some concerns, although there's some concerns that major sports organizations like the NCAA might not award major tournaments to the New Orleans area, for instance, if the bill becomes law. Although there is some doubt about that, in that the NCAA, after condemning such laws in April, did award some baseball and softball tournaments to states that have passed similar measures. You've also got Senator Jay Morris's bill allowing people age 21 or older to carry concealed weapons without what is now the requisite training or permits that are needed to carry a concealed weapon. The governor vetoed that, saying, in his view, it just doesn't make sense to not have some kind of required training and permitting for a concealed weapon. Both of these bills passed by what would be considered veto-proof margins. To the extent that party politics might be driving this, if people stay strictly to the party line, there might not be an override, because it only takes a majority to call the override session, but it takes 2/3 of the House and 2/3 of the Senate to actually override a veto. In the Senate, I think there's 27 Republicans. Party line votes would mean an override of the veto there. In the House, there's 68 Republicans. It requires 70 votes to override a veto. But there are a lot of different issues and politics involved here. For instance, with the gun, the concealed carry bill, there were several dozen law enforcement officials from around the state who gathered yesterday, I believe it was in Baton Rouge, to come out against that bill, including some local sheriffs. The Louisiana Sheriff's Association has not taken a position on it, but several powerful local sheriffs from different venues said that they're opposed to the bill, again saying they think it's a bad idea to let people have concealed carry, have carte blanche to carry weapons concealed without permits and training. Right. And there has been, I talked with our Baton Rouge correspondent Melinda DeLatte just a little while ago. She said she was listening to local radio in Baton Rouge, and there's at least one Republican legislator who voted for the bill who's going to take another look at it, in as much as his local sheriff opposed it. So it's not a done deal that it's almost certain there will be a historic veto override session on July 20th. Whether there will be overrides of these bills is the big question.
Okay, well, we'll be looking for it. Thanks a lot, Kevin.
Okay.
Let's see now. Let's go back on over. Let's go to Jeff. More council stuff, more city stuff, but city issues facing the council and the people of New Orleans. And right now, one of it is trash pickup in certain segments of the city of New Orleans. People aren't getting their trash picked up.
Yeah, it's becoming, it has been a very serious issue across about half the city that's serviced by Metro Services, one of the two major trash pickup companies in New Orleans. The problem, if you ask Metro Services, is they're having trouble finding drivers. Now, this is separate from an issue they had at the beginning of the pandemic where some of their hoppers had gone on strike for better wages, better protections, better equipment. This is a new issue. They can't find people to drive the trucks that have the right licensing and everything else to make the pickups that they need to make. So there's parts of the city, can tell you from personal experience, that have gone, full weeks without trash actually being picked up on some blocks. So the council has been pushing on this. One thing, they held a committee hearing yesterday to investigate the issue, and Metro said they're hoping that they're going to have service back to normal by the end of the month. I guess we'll see whether that happens. In the meantime, Councilman Jared Brissett has proposed waiving fees for all people who've been affected by this. That amounts to about $24 a month for trash pickup. His ordinance would waive those fees for 1 month. The administration has opposed that, saying that's just going to take more money from the city that could be needed to improve services, be used elsewhere. So it's not clear what's going to end up happening with that, but there's certainly a lot of frustration out there and a lot of trash out there.
And only in certain areas of the city. It's not a blanket of the city, right?
Correct. The Metro Services serves mainly areas sort of downriver and toward the lake, including New Orleans East, some areas from Claiborne to Lake Pontchartrain, those sorts of areas.
So the other areas of the city are getting their normal pickup, no problem there?
I can speak to that actually. Because
Okay,
I'm
come on, pipe on up.
Richards. I'm on the Richards route, and we are not having the problems that the areas served by Metro are. But there are delays. There are several days delays sometimes. So I think there's problems all over the city. I think just the areas that Jeff was alluding to with Metro are much worse.
Yeah, it is a major problem. Certainly sanitation is very important for the city. Okay, Rich, let's jump over to you now, because another issue that council has dealt with is something called inclusionary zoning. Explain what that is.
So quietly, at the beginning of this month, the city's mandatory inclusionary zoning housing policy went into effect. And this is something that had been debated for a long time. And this is a win for housing advocates who say that research shows that living in high opportunity neighborhoods will help reduce intergenerational persistence of poverty. So what this means for developers is that they must include affordable housing units in new construction or any rehab, as long as it's 10 housing units or greater. And this is specifically in the CBD, the French Quarter, Marigny, Bywater, Treme, Mid-City, Lower Garden District, all along the river there. It applies to new multifamily, whether it's a standalone or a mixed-use project. So in effect, what's going to happen is a developer is going to have to set aside up to 10% of the units for low-income residences, and for a two-bedroom apartment, that means the maximum rent would be $946 a month. There's an interesting asterisk to all this, which is that a developer can basically buy their way out of it. They pay a fee. They can avoid having to participate.
And so this is in effect now for anybody who wants to go in there with a new development.
That's right. It went into
these
effect
neighborhoods
on July 1st, pretty quietly. It had been talked about for years, and it just kind of quietly went into effect. The city sent out a press release this week. So
the developer gets the benefit of what? I mean, I know they don't have to. they don't have to live up to necessarily the parking restrictions that are usually in place.
Right. So developers, they will get bonuses, parking reductions, financial incentives, tax abatements.
Okay. All right. And so, I mean, there are those who certainly are cheering this and want to see this happen. There are those who oppose it, including developers.
Right. And I imagine we're going to see maybe more debate and more pushback. It was such a quiet news week this week that I'm not sure people were even really noticed that it went into effect. I think
this is something that's been talked about now for I think about 5 years. So it's been out there. I know some people feel that it's not, it's taken too long for this to go into effect. That it would have been better a couple of years ago, more opportunities. But we'll see how it all works out. Was there anything you wanted to add to that, Jeff?
No, I think as Rich was saying, we're sort of in a weird spot with this because this is sort of the formal date that the rules go into effect. We had a lot of debate about this back when they were being discussed. There's probably going to be a lot of debate about this as projects come up that are required to abide by this.
Right.
So we're sort of just in that interim period now where now they're in place and now we're going to see where things go.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jeff. Rich, let's bounce it back over to you. Tell us quickly now about a certain project, a program that's supporting Black-owned restaurants.
Right. So the National Urban League and Pepsi announced this week the Black Restaurant Accelerator Program. And this is a $10 million fund that's going to eventually help 500 restaurants nationwide. But in this initial announcement, there are 3 New Orleans restaurants that are on the list to receive funds and support. And those are, as pictured here, it's Buku Eats, which is a Creole spot that opened in 2019 on Canal Street. It's near the VA Medical Center. Mm-hmm. Another one is Adelston, which is an Ethiopian restaurant right around the corner, a few blocks away on South Broad, opened the same year. And then there's Taste and See, which is a personal chef and catering company on the West Bank. So these 3 restaurants are some of the first in the country to officially be participating in the program. It's the inspiration behind the program is that a lot of Black-owned restaurants and small businesses suffered during the pandemic disproportionately. So there's a variety of reasons. The wealth gap meant that a Black business owner might not have the same safety net. There was less access to capital, and there's even Forbes magazine had a recent report that showed that just in PPP applications, the Paycheck Protection Program applications, Black small business owners were approved about 30% of the time versus 60% of the time versus their white counterparts. So this program is designed to give some additional support where it's needed. And I did talk to Lakeisha Reed, who's the owner of Buku Eats this week, and she said it couldn't have come soon enough. She had some success with PPP, and she actually had great help from the World Central Kitchen, but she did not qualify for the Restaurant Revitalization Fund because she just launched in 2019 and was kind of on a growth trajectory. And so when 2020 happened, she didn't show that huge drop in gross income. So she did not qualify for that revitalization fund. So this is a lifesaver. She's installed outdoor seating and some other things to accommodate people. And these funds are going to help
so
that project.
It's actual cash infusion, like a cash grant that each of these restaurants got from this program.
That's right. Now, neither the Urban League nor any of the restaurateurs that I talked to told me the specific amount, but if I could do the math, if it's $10 million across 500 restaurants, it's probably up to $20,000 a restaurant.
Well, I know it definitely helps each of those restaurants because it's been a tough time for restaurants across the board.
For sure.
Okay. Thanks a lot, Jeff. That's good news for them. We need to go over there and sample their food. Sounds good. All right. E, let's go over to you. We saw, political assassination happening in Haiti, assassination of their president. And you wanted to talk about the historical link between Louisiana and Haiti.
But first, let me mention of those 3 restaurants, the first one that he mentioned, the one on Canal Street, I've been there several times, very good. So I would recommend it. When they had this political incident, assassination in Haiti during the week, and there was people talked about the disorder and the violence there, and Haiti's always been pretty much a violent island, but it made me think about the relationship that Haiti has between Louisiana and New Orleans, and in particular, and going back in the 1700s when slavery was dominant in Haiti, and the big product was sugar. A lot of products came out of the Caribbean, but sugar was a very, very high demand item. in Europe, and so there was a big trade. But over time, though, there was a slave rebellion in Haiti, and it was well organized by the slaves. It was a brutal rebellion, and the French couldn't overcome it. Eventually, the French gave in. I mean, with Napoleon's army, they kept on getting beaten back. So by the time in the 1800s, when there's talk about maybe the United States wanting to buy Louisiana, and France had just gotten Louisiana from Spain, that kind of looked good to Napoleon, because one, he could use that money, and two, he kind of wasn't enamored with the Caribbean anymore, wasn't enamored with Haiti, wasn't enamored with the kind of issues that he was facing. So I think he really wanted to get out of that part of the world, and so that really prompted the sale. And people talk about, what a bargain it was, but even back then, he had a lot of opposition to doing it. But imagine if it would never happened. Imagine if the United States had never gotten what essentially is maybe a little bit less than half the nation. Would this strong, powerful nation have evolved the same powerful nation that years later would save Europe twice in world wars? And so that was a very pivotal moment when Napoleon decided to go ahead and sell the Louisiana territory. And of course, what they were looking for was, as Jefferson said, the Ile d'Orléans. He said, there's only one place in North America that the possessor of which is our natural enemy, and that's the Ile d'Orléans. So he wanted to buy New Orleans, and to our smugness here in New Orleans, we can say, well, Napoleon threw in the rest of the nation almost to go along with it. So it was very
interesting. And we're running out of time now, so you want to wrap up real quick?
Well, I was just say there was also a big period of Haitian migration of people that came to the United States.
Yeah.
If you ever have a Sazerac, Peychaud's bitters, Peychaud, Antoine Peychaud was part of the Haitian migration.
All right. It really added to the population of New Orleans.
Sure did.
Definitely did. Okay, thanks, Letty. Stick with you real quick. Other stories.
Okay, well, the NBA playoffs are going on. And for those who followed the Hornets and the Pelicans, the Phoenix Suns are up by 2 games. And their star, of course, is Chris Paul, who we all remember. And their coach is Monty Williams, who was the coach of the Pelicans. So there's a real Pelicans influence there.
We remember them well. Thanks a lot. Kevin.
There were some developments in the state police custody death investigation of Ronald Green up in North Louisiana. Among them, we've learned that the FBI has ordered a review of the Ronald Green autopsy based on the fact that since the last autopsy was done, or since the autopsy was done, there have been more video evidence, more state police reports, and they want to look at it in that context.
Okay. Jeff? Real quick.
Next week is the first drawing in the state's vaccination lottery. So if you haven't registered already, get registered.
Okay. What about you, Rich?
Well, I saw this week that 2 of the tax exemption approvals came for the St. Bernard biodiesel project that people are crossing their fingers about. So that's going to be an interesting story to follow.
It sure will. Thanks a lot, guys, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us, too. See you again next week for Informed Sources. Have a good evening.